Right. Just got back from the sharing circle after the first ceremony here at Pistawa. Pistawa. It means dragonfly in, don't know, presumably Aymara or Quechua or whatever. So symbolizes metamorphosis and change, which is obviously pretty cool, which is what ayahuasca is all about. So last night's ceremony went really well in retrospect, but wasn't very happy when I first arrived. I got there at 6:30 to make sure I got the space where I want to be. And to my utter horror, the mattresses that they put long ways against the wall with two of these wedge-shaped seats that are very comfortable, as it like to sit two people sitting upright. I thought, what the fuck is going on here? This is no good. All 12 of us stuck in just half of the circumference of the Maloka. So, and the maestro was there doing some coca leaf readings or something. I said, maestro, is it okay if I go near the door? I don't like people on one side and I like space. Yeah, fine. So I went and got the mattress and I turned it facing the center as you normally would. Because it's really important, especially with the first ceremony in a new place. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what the ayahuasca is going to be like. You don't know what the shaman's going to be like. You don't know what the other guests are going to be like. So you really want to be comfortable yourself. And luckily, though, it worked out well. I was thinking, because it put me in a bit of a bad space just right beforehand. Because I was thinking, fuck, this is no good. I've never been in a retreat where they sit people next to each other and you got to sit upright. Fuck, that's worse than, it's almost as bad as being in a fucking chair that I've seen on YouTube, which is ridiculous. But she explained her reasoning later, which is kind of fair enough, because it's to do with the crown chakra facing upwards and stuff. But I've never come across this in any of the other retreats that I've done. I don't think it's important. It's far more important for people, especially if they've got injuries, like back injuries like me. And luckily Amber, who's one of the girls from Devon, well, not luckily, she came in quite late, and luckily it was the only space next to me, and that was another one that didn't have another seat next to it. So she just did what I did and turned it inwards and sort of occupied that whole space for herself and gave us good separation between us, just as it worked out. So that just worked out nicely. But other people were coming in and thinking, a lot of people saying, I felt like it was really close to each other. Because people don't want to disturb each other's space in a ceremony. When you're that close, like literally next to somebody, with only 2 feet between shoulders, and then you got your sick bowl, and you got a person on each side, and you want space if you like. I mean, I do, but anyway, everyone else was fine with it. But so that kind of kicked me off into a shitty mood first. So I was thinking, fuck, I'm going to have to phone Eric, talk to Eric the next time I see him and say, mate, this is one aspect you're not doing right. But later on, when the shaman went through all of the talks about because they're really big on explaining everything, which is nice, but it did take so long. It was about an hour to an hour and a half of the maestro explaining everything, going through all the effects of ayahuasca, and which is fine, but really, it's not, I don't know. It's nice of them to do that, and it's caring. And for the first one, fair enough. We shouldn't have to do all that again. But it really took up a lot of time, and so the ceremony was really late starting. We got there at 7:30, and by the time everything was put into place and prepped, and then the talk for an hour, and then the first drink didn't come along till probably 9 o'clock. So I'm thinking, so I'm still sort of getting more and more into a sort of a negative space with this. But again, there's always a reason, because it needed to be cleaned, because I went back to that negative space that infected me for the whole week of my phone being stolen. And I was in exactly the same space, pissed off with ayahuasca, pissed off with my journey, pissed off with having that shit happen to me, thinking, where's the protection from Mama Ayahuasca? But also kind of knowing underneath that, it's a lesson, it's a test, and I handled it badly. I should have been much more resilient than that, but I haven't been in ayahuasca for 2.5 months. I've been eating shit food, which you do on a break, coffee and brownies and the things that you treat yourself with. And then because of the last week, I couldn't do the diet either, because the food's so shit. But anyway, the ceremony itself turned out. I'm now last. She went clockwise round, like so. I'm in the end of the row, so I'm very last out of the 12 of us. And then with Marlena, who's another, I suppose she's a trainee shaman. She sang a few songs as well to help carry the load. Seems a very sweet woman, and the shamana is lovely. I do like her. She, I had a chat with one of the other guys saying this morning that, I'm not going to make a prejudgment because it's not fair, and also you never know about a shaman on their first ceremony because you never know what powers they really have or what tricks they have up their sleeve. But the ceremony for me was very, very mild. It was for everyone. It was very smooth, but she explained that today, that was also a lot to do with the external energies that were going on, because she'd said the day before there were some heavy energies amongst us. And I thought, probably me. Usually is when I go into my negative space. It's still kicking around even after all this time. They're heavy, they're steep. My burden to carry as ever. And I do fall back into it. And I get really negative because I just get sick of that. And to have my phone stolen, I know that was Mama Ayahuasca who did it. It sounds crazy to other people, but I know because it was a test. And I know that now even more so because now it's been cleaned. I can see it clearly for what it was, because it's elements of dark energy that's still in me, but it cost me my mobile phone. And because the chances of that happening, because Riberalta is a really safe place. Eric's lived here for 7 years. The crime is very low. There's just so the chances of me being in that exact fucking spot, which is what happens to me all the time, the statistical anomaly that I am is off the fucking charts. I must be like fucking fifth percentile, fifth standard deviation, like in the 0.0001% of fucking possible occurrences, but it'll happen to me. Whether it's working on IT, finding a fucking bug that never happens to anyone else except me, all of that shit still happens. Because it's designed to fucking drive me nuts and just make me be able to handle it. So anyway, I went in. I had to go through that mood, and so that consequently meant that the cups are probably 2/3 the size of this, but nearly full. And I asked her today, did you give everybody a full cup? And she said, yeah, probably for the first one. So consequently, then nothing happened for about an hour, more probably, hour and a half. And I just felt really tired, which is unusual on ayahuasca. But it was quite a sweet brew as well, so it should have been reasonably visual. But it seemed very mild, but really it's about the energies too. So from that perspective, ideal for first-timers, just to make sure they have an easy ride. And she said that her own impression after she drank ayahuasca and then doing the actual ceremony was that Mama Ayahuasca was just all about cleaning and just being nice, just being very nice to people, because there weren't any big issues. There were 2 or 3 vomits, nothing heavy. A few people had some quite good experiences, some quite visual, some good messages, which we've just heard in the sharing circle. There's a couple of those that are really interesting that I'll talk about. But from my perspective first, I started, because I was in a negative space as well, I started to be thinking about Peru and thinking, I just want to get back to, let's do this, do it properly. I can't wait to get back to my retreat in Peru, because I didn't feel any spiritual energy at all. And of course that made me doubt the abilities of the shamana, because I'm thinking I'm not feeling anything. And although I thought, well, I know I'm dirty and I haven't been here for 2.5 months and I need to be clean first, so that's probably the reason anyway, and that's just as well, because I'm in a shit space. And although it would have been nice, my intention just before the ceremony was, to Mama Ayahuasca, it would be nice to meet you again, reconnect, have a chat, see where I am, blah, blah, blah. But once this mood came on, I didn't even want to talk to Mama Ayahuasca. I just felt that shit, and I felt tired, and I just thought, I just want this to be over. I just want to go to my room, eat my apple. And also, when the medicine did start to affect just a little bit, I started to see just a little bit of fractals, and sort of half-y kind of visions that were very dim and not colourful and not really there, and then also a little bit of discomfort, very, very mild pain in my stomach. I just sitting there listening to all the chat for the first fucking hour, I'd start to get a headache, which is dehydration headache, just very mild as well. So all in all, I was just starting to get, as the ceremony, before the ceremony even kicked off, I was starting to get just, this is just not. And then thinking about that spacing and talking to Erica, I just thought, this is not the way I like it to be done. There should be much more space. They should utilize the space they have in the Maloka a lot better. Give everyone a mattress of their own so that they can lie down. But anyway, she explained it. They like to have them sitting up because of this aura, crown chakra business. But anyway, turns out, when Amber came over and she was sat next to me, she's like me. She's had, although a lot worse, she had a fucking horrendous accident when she was 18, driving around with mates in an Evo, and they crashed it at 80 mile an hour, and they were in the back. And she's broken nearly all the vertebrae, crushed some of them in her back. She's got metal in there. Now she's 36. So she lost a year of her life talking to her mum, really, just through being in hospital and treatment and going through absolute hell. So needs to sort of move and lie down and be comfortable. So it kind of, justified me seeming to be like this aloof, kind of miserable outsider, like having this special space. But I'd gone there because I've got experience, so I get there and do these things because I know it's important for me to feel comfortable, especially if you get next to someone where you're not happy with their energies. Fortunately, I didn't have that sensitivity last night because the medicine wasn't that strong, which was just as well. So anyway, the upshot of it was that by the time the ceremony, the medicine wore off, I was actually felt like I'd been cleaned, and when the ceremony was over, it was that bad energy had been removed. So at least I thought, well, at least I know the ayahuasca's working, even though I'm not sure about the shamana's abilities with her Icaros, because they were very sad and very depressing as well, really melancholy. She's got quite a nice voice. The other girl, not so much, but they were singing, these nice, but they were very sad energies. I mean, maybe they're aimed at other people, because it turned out that there's a couple of people there that, I'll mention that in a minute, really interesting stories. There's a lovely girl from the Lebanon, and she was in tears today in the sharing circle. So ayahuasca's working, I've spoken to most of them, and they're all lovely people, and I've given them tips and stuff, and they've all taken it on board. But then now it'll be apparent what I've explained. Although the maestro did go through all of that anyway, and which is nice, because I've not come across that so much in any other retreat where they spend that amount of time explaining all of the different effects that ayahuasca might have during the ceremony, aftermath, integration, the emotional aspects to it, the dark side that some people have to go through, the loving side, the nice bright side, and some people had that. Some people had a bit of both. So it was great. So the only odd thing that I just explained in my turn in the sharing circle, because she likes to make notes, she actually listens to everybody, gives them quite a lot of, a bit of feedback, and also about the additional plant medicines, how they might help work on someone's issue to help them. So it's really nicely done actually today, seeing it as it's opening and becoming clear as to the reasoning why they do things the way they do. And it's always interesting to hear these, to see the way different shamans and different retreats work. That's why I never do the same one twice, except like Shipibo, because obviously it's my shamans are there, and my base and my family, effectively my ayahuasca family, because we've got the strongest two shamans on the planet, I think, that I've come across, Urias and Hyro, Shipibo and Kokama. But we'll see, because I don't know how strong she really is. But she held the space really well. And Sean, the other guy from Oz, he's got 20 ceremonies experience. He's been through some really strong ones with Aborigines in Australia, which is really useful to know. The Aborigines in Australia, in the rainforest in the north, are growing ayahuasca there, even though it wasn't indigenous. they're growing ayahuasca, and they are really powerful too, he said, because they obviously the Aborigines have got such a massive connection to nature, having wandered the Australian continent for 40,000 years. So their ceremonies are really powerful too, and he's had some fantastic ones he's told me about, entities, all sorts, just really powerful with ayahuasca in Australia. So, but it's probably underground or illegal. I'm not sure what the status is in Australia, and the way there's such a police state now after fucking COVID, you probably have to dig around to be able to find out where to go and get that. But anyway, it's worth knowing that Australia is another possible place, if you're there, to do good quality ceremonies with indigenous Aborigines that have learnt how to use ayahuasca. So that was really interesting. So I had a good chat with him, because obviously he's the only one near my level that we can talk about things like possession and other topics that I obviously don't talk to first-timers at a ceremony, at a retreat, because you don't want to frighten them and just let it unfold, and then people start to learn a lot more about what the spiritual aspect is and how deep and how that's what it's all about, actually. People who just do their research and think it's just a hallucinogenic drink. You have no idea how it really works or how the whole process works. It's super complicated and super nuanced in so many different ways, and this is why everything's different at every retreat, every ceremony, every shaman, every group, because everybody brings their own different energies, and what the jungle's doing, what nature's doing, the moon, they all play parts in all of this dance. So the sharing circle was nice today. The girl, Lebanon, she lives in the UK. She's Nua. She's lovely. She's so sweet. And when it was her turn, got the maraca and just had to shake maraca, introduce herself again to Mama Ayahuasca, and then recount relatively briefly our experience of the night before for the shaman to give feedback to. And then she was telling her story, and she started crying. And so I was thinking, everything I've spoken about to the others is correct. They'll see people finally unfold as the medicine starts working. You never know who's hiding what or what the reasons are that they've been brought to ayahuasca to be unburdened, and until it slowly unfolds. So it was really nice, but really sad because it turned out that 10 years ago, she's been carrying this for 10 years. She was the youngest of some daughters, three daughters, and the father left the mother when she was very young, and she said she grew up very close to her mother and saw the effect of her father leaving. So she was always angry and resentful against her father for treating her mother like that. But in the last couple of years, he got really sick from a particular illness, and she was in a situation where she started to get the feeling that she should reconnect with her father before it was too late, because he was really sick and with a terminal illness, or a very serious illness, but it turned out to be terminal. And anyway, the upshot of it was, as she got older, this final conversation, because she needed to forgive him and to have forgiveness from him for the way that she felt her and her mother had been treated by him, leaving them, etc. So she'd been carrying this baggage for 10 years, and of course the upshot of it was she never got the meeting, so she never had the last words with her father before he died. And then after ayahuasca, last night, she said she was reading her book before the circle this morning and read something in the book and then thinking about her father and started crying while she was before the sharing circle. And then, of course, she had to recount this, and then that triggered her. So she was really upset in the ceremony. She's so sweet. She's a lovely girl. So that was awkward, or just unpleasant, for that moment. But you also know that Aya's working. She's doing her job to start that grieving process, or just that working on that negative energy that she's carried for so long, so that she can be relieved of it. And then it was really nice because the shamana said, look, we're just bodies. The shamana had lost her father when she was young, and she said, I've been in a similar situation, and so don't worry, it's possible to communicate with your father. When I talk to you privately about the medicine, we'll discuss ways that we can facilitate this, because it's possible, so that you can get that closure, hopefully over the next 2 ayahuasca ceremonies and 1 San Pedro ceremony. So that was good. And then the doctor from Nigeria who lives in the States, he's a nice guy. He had a really interesting story, because he was right after her, and he said during his he had some nice fractals, and not too heavy, but it was all, he saw some nice visuals and sort of coloured butterflies flying away. Felt really secure, Mama Ayahuasca presence, that kind of thing. And then he said at one point he had a vision of this person from his home country, or somebody, or a messenger of some sort, coming into the Maloka, going over and speaking to the shamana, giving her a message that his father had just died. And that was his vision in the ceremony, which is a bit harsh. So, of course, then he went from having this nice space, feeling secure and everything, to fuck. But also realizing, well, that can't be true in real life. But then the point was, that was his message, was that because he'd, again, similar to the other girl, he'd been back to Nigeria earlier in the year with the intention of going to see his father, but then he was tired on the passage through Europe and ended up flying back to his job in the States. He didn't actually go through Morocco and onto Nigeria for whatever reasons, tiredness, he said, mainly, and whatever. So he never actually got to see his father. So that really made him think, probably his father's age, to rethink that, just in case his father is on limited time. So now he's actually going to go and spend Christmas back in Nigeria and have this much needed conversation, which he was on his way to do the previous time, but then didn't. So that was really interesting, because you think, wow, what a strange set of circumstances that you'd have a vision of someone coming into your ayahuasca ceremony to tell you, like a warning, to avoid the worst case scenario. Make sure you go the next opportunity before it's too late, and go and have that conversation with your father, in case you don't ever get the chance again. So that was really quite interesting. So on the whole, really good. And then the shamana said something interesting for me, because I mentioned about, when I explained the only weird thing that happened in my ceremony, I told her, I said, look, I knew what was going on. I've got, 58 ceremonies experience or whatever, and I said, so I knew I was dirty, I knew that I needed cleaning, so I wasn't really interested in interacting, because I was in the wrong space to even dishonor Mama Ayahuasca by being in a shit space. So I just didn't want to talk to her, and I just kind of cut off all communication with anything that may have been happening. And I wasn't feeling spiritual energy, so I didn't think I was going to get a link anyway. I certainly didn't. Mama couldn't get through. It wasn't strong enough because it was very mild, but because of my stomach and just the shit mood I was in, when she asked me to, do I want a second cup, I said, at the moment it's just starting to come on stronger, so I'll wait. She said, well, if you want any more, let me know later. And then I was in that mood, then just not wanting to be in it. Just fuck it. It's a write-off tonight. Can't be bothered anyway. It's probably just as well. I don't want to be in a shit space tripping till 5 a.m. or something. And as it turned out, I didn't get back to the room till 1:30 because the ceremony was late because of the late start, even though it was very mild. Some people did do a second cup. The Dutch guy here did, and he was little bit wobbly, but it was still very mild, and most people had a really good first ceremony, which is because I'm conservative in that view as well, and it seems the shamana is, which is good, because I keep saying to people, those that are gung-ho go, oh, I'm just going to do 2 cups. I mean, Sean's like that. He's the Aussie guy with 20 ceremonies experience, and yeah, I'm sure he's got the experience to be able to want to do it. But because I've been through some really fucking horrible ceremonies when they've been really strong and really unpleasant, I always advocate to people the trap. You just don't want to be thinking, oh, I want to go really high, man, as if it's a normal drug. It doesn't work like that. you can end up in a world of pain and fucking horrible hell, absolute fear, anxiety, horrible physical manifestations, super scary entities flying about, and you just don't want to be there and stuck there for 5 hours because you've gone, I want to take load. You do the first cup, you see how it goes, and if it's just not seeming to fade or not so visual or so deep, then maybe think about doing a second cup. And then I clarified that with the shamana to be sure when she said, she said all this, and then you can ask me for a second cup. I said, just to clarify, the second cup though, because obviously I know only from my experiences that doesn't mean you have to have a full second cup. You can just ask for a little bit, a minimum. She said, I can give you a third or half or whatever. It's just so that everyone else was clear on that before tomorrow's ceremony. So that if it's not too strong and they're not really going somewhere, but they don't want to take a whole second cup just in case that's too much, or it reacts with the first one because the timing's out, and then you get both when you thought you had none. It can be not. It can be a really unpleasant thing to experience, the trap. So anyway, reiterated that everyone's pretty clear on that now, so they know. So I'll probably do 2 cups myself tomorrow. Again, depends, but you always judge by the first cup. If the first cup's really strong, you might not need it. So it'll be interesting to see whether tomorrow, now that I feel a bit better and had a bit of that negativity removed from me, whether can get back to some of my normal levels of higher level spiritual energy and start to feel energies and get more out of it, and maybe meet Mama Ayahuasca again and have a conversation about where I am and where I'm going and whatever the fuck she's going to talk about, or if anything, which she never tells me anything about my future anyway, so I don't expect anything anymore. But it'll be nice to reconnect. But what she was said at the end of the ceremony was really interesting, because when I said the only thing that was a bit strange was at one point where at the peak, just before it faded rapidly, at the peak of the medicine, which then I was thinking, oh fuck, is this coming on really strong? And then it kind of peaked and then just faded out, and I thought, oh, that's fine. There was this one bit where there was a feeling of a presence of entities that wasn't visual, just a kind of a presence. And I didn't have an initiation conversation with Mama Ayahuasca, but I had this, and it wasn't even a voice in my head, it was just this impression, and it asked me twice, who are you? And I ignored it, because I was thinking, what entity is this? I don't, it could be anything, don't know. And then it asked me again, who are you? And then, of course, I knew Mama Ayahuasca wasn't present, and I just said, I'll only answer that question when I know I'm talking to Mama Ayahuasca. And anyway, in other words, if Mama Ayahuasca's present, she wouldn't need to ask me who I was. So that was the only thing that was strange. And then when I mentioned that, I heard a sort of like, oof, from someone, as if my attitude, just like they didn't expect me to be that confident and forceful in that environment. But you don't know what you're dealing with. It could be a trickster, it could be some aspect of negative energy that's trying to engage you, just to see. And then the shamana said, look, they said, there are entities walking around all the time. There are different, all sorts that are around us all the time, but we don't see them in our normal existence. And she said, there are these sort of trickster ones. And then Sean piped up and he said, that sounds probably about that entity you mentioned. He said, it sounds like the strange one that I said came and popped up out of a trap door in the floor in his vision, just stuck its head up and like had a look around, So there's it's almost comical, especially after the conversation we had of the walk in the jungle, where the guide had said about the trees sending this policeman nuts. He lost his marbles because of the effect. But she clarified that later in talking yesterday when we had a little chat in the group, and she said I said I didn't catch the whole story what it was, and then we got the really nice girl Vera from Holland she's done a master's in Spanish and spent time in Spain, so she's a brilliant, just as well. She's a really good, she's our translator, effectively. Although Maestra speaks reasonable English, when she wants to just be clear and just spiel, she'll speak in Spanish. So Vera has been doing our excellent translations. So this translation about what was going on with the tree, because I said, what was the story with this policeman? And he said, it's not the tree, because that's right, the Nigerian guy is in a cabin on the other side behind here, and he's got one of these big trees right by his cabin. Of course, because of what the guide said, they can have moods at certain times of day, and they can have negative effects on people. Well, it wasn't quite true. The Maestra said no. She said there are some trees where there are other inhabitants that live in the trees. It's their house. Coming back to our fairy stories from Ireland and all the leprechauns and all this. So she called them elves, and she said it's the elves. But she said normally what they do, they only have that detrimental effect. She said the trees themselves are guardians. They're not harmful. She said, so no, don't be afraid of the tree. Actually go and give it a hug, So that was interesting. She said, because it's not the tree. She said the tree is the house, because they're super guardians. They're really powerful old spirits, obviously, trees. Especially these big ones in the Amazons with the massive roots that stick out, like that, like Predator film. So it was amazing. So she blamed it on the elves. She said because what they'll do is they'll maybe affect a human being who's maybe trying to harm the tree, like cut the tree down or cut marks in it, or or certainly cut it down. That can have detrimental effects if it happens to be the house of a little family of elves or tribe of elves that are living in there. So it's lovely to hear these local sort of cultural stories. So that was cool. So what else? So on the whole, half an hour. It's not too bad. It won't make any difference. I've got to send these videos off from the hotel anyway for the first night. I realised this morning that it's 10 days. It's going to be 7 days from now. We're 3 days in. It's Sunday, so we're going to be going back to Riberalta on a Sunday, so there may or may not be a flight anyway, in which case, and it'll be the afternoon, so I don't know if there's a flight. And just to be sure, after the effects of the retreat, I'll stay in the campo, because at least I know the room's quiet at the back there, and even though the food's shitty, it's the best I can get, and I'll just fly out the next day as soon as possible. Because I just don't want to stay around Riberalta because of the food and just the general shitty environment. Just don't like the place after what happened, but also because of it's the food. You just can't get decent food. It's all crap. So anyway, I'll fly back to La Paz as soon as possible. But before then, she said yesterday that at the moment, it's always subject to change depending on how people's ayahuasca ceremonies go. We've got 2 more to do. The fourth ceremony will be San Pedro at this point. And that was what she said that was interesting, because when I mentioned the entities, and she was talking about, the way different entities are around and different energies and all of this stuff, and how complicated it is, which is what I tell people all the time. It's just so complicated to get a handle on because there's so many variables. That she was talking about, people bringing, bad energies with their particular moods or their traumas or their anger. All of these are forms of negative energy, which you can kind of view as individual entities effectively in themselves. It's the best way to kind of visualize them. It's probably nothing like that in reality, but it's just the best way to kind of get a handle on it in your head, because negative entities or negative energy is but it's just what's the word I'm looking for? Can't think. They're just parasites, and then they stick to you, and we bring them with us. So this is what she was saying. But she said about, she's probably a bit biased because she does work. She was doing work with coca leaves from the mountain, because she said she's not actually from the jungle. She's from the mountains. So primarily, she probably would have been trained as a San Pedro shamana first, and then because she said. And even if this is what ayahuasca's cleaning, is these negative energies. She said, and if ayahuasca doesn't clean them, she said, San Pedro certainly will. I thought, ooh, that sounds great to know, especially if she's a San Pedro shaman, because that's our 4th one. Because again, from my previous experience, 10 months of ayahuasca, it took San Pedro, as much as I didn't like it, and it was really difficult and fucking hard in Ecuador. There's 3 ceremonies there were horrible. Didn't enjoy them at all. I felt terrible. But that final exorcism was San Pedro, and that was what got rid of that nasty, fucking demonic level energy that I was carrying, that I spoke about in Ecuador. So hopefully, and I'm really curious to see how clean I am, relatively speaking, to see what effect San Pedro has on me this time compared to 2 years ago now, nearly. I think it was about March 2 years ago that I was in Ecuador. Just to see what the effect of it is this time, because obviously it's during the day, and then it's about, we go for a walk in the jungle, and it's about connecting with nature. It's much more just daytime, normal, bit more active, you're out walking. But they can still be long ceremonies. But the last experience with San Pedro, it lasted about 15 hours. It was just this permanent anxiety in my stomach. And it got stronger as the day went on. And Sean's done it, and he said the same thing. He said he was like going on it for 14 hours when he did it. And it's, so it can be tricky. So but I'll be glad to do it. Just hopefully that will really mop up other stuff that maybe ayahuasca can't clean. So anyway, on that note, I shall finish this.